Hey, what's going on, everybody? On today's show, what if your weather app knew the storm before it happened, before it formed? So we know AI is shaping how we predict the skies. We got from hyperlocal forecasts to early warning signs for extreme events. Machine learning, AI models are really transforming weather prediction from an art into really even more of a high precision science. So it brings up some questions that we want to talk about today on the show. Are we entering a new era where like the bigger tech giants, and we'll talk about which ones, are the new gatekeepers of global weather and forecasting? Can we even trust the AI generated forecasts when the models themselves are a bit of a black box, which is happening right now? Will hyperlocal AI forecasting deepen inequalities? So is it a situation where we're going to be offering premium weather accuracy to some while others get left behind? That's a true fear. And the bigger question is AI going to one day outclass meteorologists? Is that a dying profession? Will we still really need meteorologists, or is it just going to be about everybody having the most accurate hyperlocal AI enhanced weather predictions on every single phone and device that we have? So look, this is the Daily AI Show. This is what we want to talk about today. Today is April 22nd, 2025. On the show with me today, we have Junmi, Beth, Andy. I almost said me, Andy, and I'm Brian. And we've decided that it's hat day. That's just the way the day started. So now we're all wearing hats on the show today. As we were just joking with Andy. Andy's on the West Coast. So Andy, I was just saying that number one, you have the camo hat on. So it looks like you're in the middle of a hunt in the woods. But also, I was always saying like the sun typically rises during the show for Andy. So we always start in sort of the dark with these, quote, pun intended, cloudy ideas. See what I did there? And then as the show goes and we get over the hour, the sun rises and it's sunny out where Andy is, and we have new clarity and we can see farther. Yeah, I'll keep going with that. So I'm gonna throw this over to you, Jimmy, to get things kicked off. But I did want to say welcome to everybody in the chat. We already have 17 people who have chatted in there. Thank you very much. Make sure you guys get into the conversation in the chat if you have an opportunity to do so. If you can't join us live, this is a great opportunity to let you know that we have a fairly new community. So go to the dailyaishowcommunity.com. That will take you to the sign into the Slack community. And so even if you can't be with us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, like our fine folks are right now, you can join us in our new Slack community and continue the conversation there. If you have some great stories about AI and weather, hey, we would love to hear from you. Okay, Jimmy, over to you.
Okay. So, just as a little primer, this is a topic, or AI and weather, or weather prediction in that field. It's relatively new, just like everything in AI. But weather prediction, in and of itself, has been around for quite a bit. And just as a bit of a primer, traditional weather prediction is used off of essentially physics-based systems, right? And they have both short, medium, and long forecasts. Right? If you've ever seen the Weather Channel, you'll see what the weather is for today. They'll forecast it out for the week. If you dig deep, you can probably get what they think it'll be out for the month or the quarter, those kinds of things. Right? And these are all based, that's what they call physics-based, right? So they run these simulations, inputting all kinds of information that they've gathered, and they run simulations in these physics engines that need supercomputers to compute these kinds of larger visual models and things like that. And this is what these large, like the Weather Service use, and all of these governmental type agencies that provide this data, and then it gets filtered into the meteorologists and the news agencies to then have somebody in front of a green screen going, all right, we're gonna see some sunshine today. Californian weather people must have the job easy. It's like, sunshine tomorrow, more sunshine. But okay, I'll digress. All right, but essentially that's been the norm. All right, now we're entering with AI. And so the AI prediction models, they've basically just burst onto the scene because in each of the categories, both in time and in distance, because that's the two main thing, right? I talked about short, medium, and long predictions. That's a time variant. And then there's distance, right? How large of an area, like 1 kilometer, 16, I think there's one at 16 kilometers. There's one, and then there's like, so there's local area, regional area, national area, those kinds of regions there. And so when the AI models have kind of burst onto this scene, the big thing they provided was in certain of the fields, particularly the short and the medium, they provided high accuracy at very low resource cost, which is which is usually the opposite when we're talking about AI. It's always like, oh, tons of electricity, tons of water, and all those kinds of. That's still true, but in the terms of how much resources and time is needed to come up with the predictions and run the models, the resources are far less because you don't need the supercomputers to do it. You can run these models on a computer, a
Mhm.
desktop computer, a laptop. So that's vastly different than the traditional methods, right? And the accuracy has increased for these certain fields. Not everything. It's not a complete sweep, but they've been able to get the accuracy to such a high level that we're starting to see the shift to more and more organizations using the AI models, right? Because it's so cheap to get these predictions for these particular regions, so the short and the medium primarily. Now, there is a couple big players. So, like Brian mentioned, there's Google's in there with their DeepMind. They have something called GenCast. Microsoft's in there. They right now have a partnership with the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, the
Yeah.
ECMWF. Yeah, like no one's going to remember that,
Yeah.
but we'll just call it the European folks. Um,
But they're one of the ones that is one of the sources of traditional models, right?
mhm.
That's kind of why they're
Yeah,
a relevant player, is because they're one of the models that is like, oh, we maybe should do some AI stuff because that seems to be happening.
Yeah, they're the European equivalent to our National Weather Service. So the National Weather Service is the one that you'll hear mentioned when they talk about weather forecasts for Tornado Alley and whether big storms are going to be happening and things like that. That all comes from the National Weather Service, not necessarily to be confused with NOAA, which is on the ocean side of things. Even though they do cross in certain places, but I don't think that's necessarily relevant for today. But so we're seeing this trend going to these AI models. Now, what like with transitioning anything, since the AI models are not perfect sweeping across the board, and of course, transitioning or doing change agency from moving one tech to another tech takes a long time, these organizations are starting to take a hybrid approach. Okay. So, because it excels in many of the areas, but not all of the areas. So traditional models are still top in things like cloud cover, dust, certain weather extremes, things like that. So it doesn't, they're looking at it as like, oh, okay, this side of the coin, we'll stick with traditional. This side of the coin, AI models seem to be doing better. So that's kind of where that's transitioning to. A lot of this work has been coming in from universities like Cambridge and their new Aardvark model. Aardvark is their, I guess, basically their hat in the ring in terms of being able to provide AI-driven weather predictions. So let's see. Their main thing is that they're focusing on real world observations as opposed to numerical weather prediction, right? Doing That's the traditional sense. That's the physics one, right? And they're able to do this by only using 10% of the data. So that's kind of what's saving, or it's cheaper to run these models, those kinds of things. Beyond that, one of the things I wanted to throw to the rest of you, so hopefully that's enough of a primer of where we're at right now, right? But the question I want to throw to you guys is, where are the possible things that you think that this actually touches? And I'll just throw an example out. The energy market. So AI in weather prediction can affect the energy market.
Oh,
So,
I see what you're saying.
right. So where else do you think it, that's my question that I'm posing, is because it's far more reaching than I initially thought it was. It's not just, oh, this is a better way to know that it's going to be sunny next week.
I got
But
you. You're saying like if AI truly enhances AI, or if AI truly enhances AI, whether to hyperlocal, super, maybe predictive, prescriptive, maybe even because I mean, even I think who was just saying in there, like, so nobody thinks we'll just be creating the weather, and like cloud seeding that happens over in like Saudi Arabia,
yes,
right?
that's
Craig was
another
just talking
one.
about that,
Weather manipulation
right?
is another touch
So
point.
he brought that up as well. But
Yep.
what I was gonna where I was going with this, Jimmy, I don't mean to track. I think where I was thinking is like when you said where else will this impact? I was just thinking like we have watches that can now detect early warning signs of what heart attack and stroke and stuff like that because it's reading biometric. And so I wonder if in this, because you've been saying that now you can do these really, AI is making it really capable in the future of doing highly complex computations on small devices with low power energy, then doesn't that open a world where we get to edge computing, like really edge computing, as in watches, phones that are able to take humidity levels from the air. And then if that's the case, then now you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small points of data. I'll give an example. When I grew up in a town called Peachtree City, Georgia, and one year they're like, "Hey, the weather center is moving to Peachtree City." So then from then on, it was like a point of pride for the small town. You know, it was like if you heard about the national weather forecast, it would always say out of Peachtree City, which also made you think like, hey, I bet you we're good in Peachtree City. If there's a tornado coming, we have the smartest, brightest people in our town literally working on this, right? But they did it all for Atlanta because Peachtree City is only like 45 minutes south of Atlanta, or used to be. Used to be. I don't know how many miles it is, but anyway, my point is like that was like a center point, and we consider that to be hyper local at that point in the 90s, right? So now it's like, well, if we get to this point where we can do super edge computing and it's all about internet of things, and we can do these kind of computations like you're talking about, I mean, isn't the future like not only from the predictive and prescriptive, but to your point, how do businesses start capitalizing on that type of data, a la, hey, I think it's going to rain, so I put the umbrellas up at the front of the store, right? Like this is, or if you go to Disney, the better example would be Disney with the ponchos. Disney is quick with the ponchos, man. So is Universal. If I think they have the best weather system because they know the minute to put those ponchos out at the very front, they wheel those little things out, and they're like, you know, you need them, you know, if you want to keep riding rides and stuff. So something like that is where my brain went.
So part of
Right.
what I'm thinking is that it like it makes it possible to be incredibly personalized, right? So if
Mhm.
I want to right now have a conversation with any of my lady wiretaps about what the weather forecast is. We're having a conversation based on the weather app that says chance of rain is 20% and all those kinds of things. But if the data is able to be run in a way that's very low power, or as Brian's saying, if like at some point in the near future we become our own weather vane digital kind of thing, now I can really say, okay, this is my plan for the afternoon. What do I need to know in order to take advantage of what we know about the weather for today and the next 3 days, right? Like
Mhm.
now I can really get very personalized information based on based on like my personalized information. And that I think is a little bit of a game changer because, it's still all we're doing is like, an umbrella in your car and a poncho. Absolutely, let's put the poncho in the car too.
Mhm.
But being able to personalize it, not just in terms of collection, but also in terms of an expert advice on a question that I have. Maybe it's an outdoor show, right? Should we be should we be forecasting? Should we be letting people know about our outdoor shows, or is it likely that we're gonna need to change the date? Those sorts of things.
Right, changing venue, making micro adjustments. Yeah, I totally get that, because my one of the ways my brain went when looking at this is, I know with enough accuracy and with enough lead time, because they're talking about models that can give you 45-day, highly accurate 45-day forecasts, right? What if I'm running ships, logistics, trucks, trains? I know a storm is going to form in this region. I
Right.
divert traffic. I divert my vehicles, because by the time my ship gets from point A to point B, there's going to be a storm in the middle. So I'm just going to divert it just a mile away, you know. And this is where the energy thing comes into place, the energy markets, because they'll know, you know, what's all of these generative kind of things. um, Agriculture, I know when it's going to rain, and then we go into the manipulation side of things. I can make it rain. There's University of Colorado, I think, they did a test where they found that they could do snowfall seeding. They could increase snowfall seeding by 15%. Now, whether they should or not, that's a whole
Yeah.
other question.
It's backed by Breckenridge and every other major ski
You-
resort.
Exactly. So,
Like they're funding that, I'm sure.
yeah. And what's going to happen if you can manipulate regional weather? How's that going to affect national or global weather?
If I'm not
Right.
mistaken, Dubai or Saudi Arabia, and somebody was saying Dubai in the comments, so I might have been wrong about Saudi Arabia, but regardless, a Middle East country caused flash flooding when they were doing some seeding, and so that causes its own problems. You
Well,
dump enough water quickly in a desert, you get what you get. It doesn't have a whole lot of places to go, and it like they were because the reason I remember this is because it was a bunch of TikToks and things like that of like really expensive supercars that were 3 feet in the water,
mhm.
and it had flooded everything. If I'm kind of, I don't, so I'll say I'm not sure on this one, but if I remember the story right, it did have something to do with cloud seeding and manipulation of weather in general on it or something.
So one of the things that I'm thinking, Jumi, as you're talking about supply chain and rerouting, is like we have talked on the show before about personalized location data. You're driving down the road, it's hot, you see the sign change that says, hey, don't you want to stop at McDonald's for the whatever it is
Mm,
that you're going to get, and then your phone gives you the coupon
right.
notification like 3 blocks before you get there.
Hmm.
Now, are we looking at a situation where supply chain it has that possibility, right? So the weather information is saying, wow, this needs to be rerouted, and there are several things that start to hit based on what like, hey, we see that you're going to have to reroute things, right? It's going to take you this amount of time. We're going to give you 10% off if you use our supply chain connector system or whatever it is. Like that, the idea that something could be taking that information and personalizing it, but in a very large market personalization, right? Like that giant middle ground. Andy, I don't think we've heard from you. What are you thinking about this?
Well, I want to say a couple of things about the weather, and I also want to jump into the AI model architectures that are best for time series forecasting, which is what this is all about. So, First, let's talk about time series forecasting. AI and machine learning before that became very good at taking data that was historical time series and then projecting that out into the expected forecast for what would be an application like demand planning in a very complex, market environment, or any kind of thing where you're trying to predict what the next events are going to be in a time series of events that you've already recorded in your data. Rewinding back to 2023, when I first started diving into machine learning and AI, I was in the consumer packaged goods business, and I was very interested in how do we predict with more accuracy what the complex dynamics of the market for beverages is. You got a cold box with hundreds of options there, and they're all competing with each other, and people are walking up to that box and they're making a choice. How do you predict what the market dynamics are and what your probable share of the demand represented by people grabbing, cans off the shelf is going forward? And I talked to a company, I can't remember the name right at the moment, but that was early on one of the best players in that market space trying to apply AI. And I asked them, because I was interested in the architecture, I asked them, okay, you've tried all these different AI or machine learning models. What are you actually implementing, and what's the basic model that is driving your prediction engine? And they said it's gradient boosted trees. And that's a kind of AI model that we don't talk about anymore. Why? Because transformers came down the pike, and transformers have this advantage, which is they're very, very good at digesting enormous amounts of data and making high accuracy predictions. So now the state of the art in these kinds of things is actually based on transformer as the foundation, but then, additional capabilities. And in the area of weather specifically, it turns out that the physics-based models, which are trying to simulate the movement of atoms in the air, basically, which is why the supercomputers are so important. They're not operating at the cloud level; they're operating at the air mass level and temperature variations across the globe and what happens in physics. And so those physics models are pretty good at looking at very long-term predictions. Okay, it looks like the temperature is going to be this much higher because we see that trend happening in the Pacific region up here in the north. And so that's going to move these things. So we change our assumptions in the model. The physics then plays out with all these interactions between the evaporating water and the air masses and the sun heating and all of that. And that's the physics-based model. Turns out that the transformers are state of the art now. But there are applications in weather specifically that take a combination of a transformer model and a physics thing working together so that they can do those things. But now I want to just back up to here I am locally, and I'm more interested in what's going to happen literally right here on this ranch. Like, are we going to get a downpour here today or not? Do I have to put the horses in the stalls? Or, do I have to prepare the arena so that it drains correctly? And all of that local stuff is better handled, in my opinion, by Doppler radar. So you can tell me that the chances of rain, and the forecasting system can say the chances for rain in your region, like in this 20 square mile area, is 30%. And I look at that and I go, okay, well, I don't have to worry too much. But if I'm watching the Doppler radar, I can see this, mass coming toward me. I can see the direction of its movement because they play it as a video for a time segment. And I can see that, there's a big burst of rain hitting out there 2 miles from me, and it's right on track for hitting me. So that's not AI. That's just radar. And so highly local and immediate forecasting is better without AI. But AI gets better and better at predicting what's going to be happening over the course of a day, over a region, and then ultimately to do the 10-day forecast where it says, okay, now with pretty high confidence, when it says next Wednesday, it's going to be 2.5 inches of rain in your area, right? I have confidence in that forecast, although it still happens that comes around Tuesday, the forecast is completely changed and they dropped the rain forecast to 1/10 of an inch, right? Why? Because they've seen that instead of moving along this track in the data that's being absorbed by the forecasting models, they've seen that it's actually moved farther north from me. And so now I'm not in the line of fire. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you're exactly right. We see the same thing with spaghetti models with hurricanes, right? So we're coming back around to hurricane season here in Tampa, and that starts. I happen to know this, and it starts like July 1st or whatever. And the reason I know that is because my wife is a lead. She works for the state of Florida, and so they have mandatory hurricane duty. If you get called up on your team, the red team, the black team, you get called up, you have to work the shelters. Well, my wife for the last couple of years has been a lead. This year they changed things up a little bit and they said, look, there'll be a little bit additional pay. It's not much. It's like a little bump or whatever if you're a lead. But also what that means is you cannot take more than 2 consecutive days off for the entirety of the hurricane season, right? So it happens to be something we're talking about a lot in our house, because it was like, do we want to commit to that? What does that mean for vacation, whatever? But my point is to this is like the spaghetti models every time, like, because I'm in Florida, I'm hanging down on the peninsula, so like we're always looking at last season was different, but usually what's coming from Africa. And is it spinning? Is it growing? Where do we think it's going to go? High, low, over Haiti, hit Cuba? What are we talking about as far as the path's going? Although this last season, we had a few that came up from Mexico and actually caused damage too. When we had the back-to-back storms here in Tampa, we're putting up the storm shutters. You guys probably remember that. So I think you're right. Like, maybe it's not for the day-to-day, maybe it's this hybrid approach, and maybe AI helps there too with your Doppler and what's it going to do on Andy's ranch specifically versus like what you can just see on Doppler. Maybe there's some hybrid there, but what I would love to see is AI specifically for the hurricane season really try to bring these spaghetti models to more of a cohesive shot. Because what they'll do, everybody's seen this on the maps, they'll throw all of them up there, and then there's always one that's like it has to do in loop-de-loops or something, and it's completely different. And as you get closer and closer and closer, all those models start to coalesce, and then that's one shot, and then usually only about a day or two out you have a potential landing. And even that we had issues with last year, where at the last minute it dipped low and went to like Fort Myers and destroyed it. And of course, if you're on the West Coast like I am, I'm on the Gulf Coast, then what you want to know is, are you high or low or where the landing is? Because that either means that the wind is whipping off the coast, or it means that is flood surge and is whipping onto the coast, and it makes a drastic difference. So I say that all to say, like, in a very real world, every single year, especially with climate change, we're dealing more and more and more with these potentially catastrophic type weather events than any of these AI models that are able to bring these spaghetti models closer. Just means literally billions in preparation and potential missed damage by getting people out to the shelters earlier. What my wife does, but just evacuating areas and what it takes to just do that, where they turn the south lanes going north and it's like everybody's going the same direction towards Georgia, which has happened before. So I don't know, from my standpoint, I think I'm the most excited about these AI models helping with this stuff, because it would definitely affect my life for sure.
Well, I think that's one of those really exciting things that we're seeing from these AI models being implemented. And of course, this is the worst they'll ever be. So they're just going to get better and better. There's a story out of the University of Cambridge talking about, their aardvark and then AI models in weather specifically. And there was a project run in Bangladesh for their cyclones, which is the Southern Hemisphere name for hurricanes. And they were able to reduce cyclone-related deaths by 37% because they were an early adopter of an AI project. So that is a great example of the direction that this can go. And Andy, for your use case of what's happening in the day, we're like Microsoft's project with the European organization. They're talking about using their quantum systems, right? they're calling quantum annealing with deep learning to solve for weather prediction and things like that. And they're expecting 30-day forecasts with 90% accuracy. So you'll get the equivalent of your Doppler, Doppler reading, but 30 days beforehand. So this is the kind of thing that they're doing. Now, specifically, they want to concentrate on where they'll have the biggest impact. So their pilot program is focusing on Tornado Alley, which is like this very unique and crazy, like, natural forming area in the United States because of its unique geography, that like the vast majority of tornadoes happen in that region because of the plains and the weather system. They don't have a blocking mountain range going east-west, all those kinds of things. But that kind of weather is they know it's coming. It comes pretty consistently over time, but you can save, like you said, Brian, with the hurricane, you can save people's lives, and you can save property damage by being able to know that, oh, we're 90% sure that in 30 days you're going to have a tornado rip through this area. Right?
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, to think about that being a possibility is crazy. Yeah.
And so,
that I could go that far out. I mean, it's almost like that's hard for me to wrap my head around. And I guess just like you only know what you know, right? It's the ignorance of this is what I know a forecast to be. And I've been around since 78, and it's gotten better. My phone tells me more and more accurate things. My daughter this was never a thing when I was a kid, but my daughter and all her friends are obsessed with UV and what the range is going to be for the day. And the app shows you, and they, peak time to get out to get a good suntan when they got a sunburn. These kids have got this down to a science. And I thought it was just my daughter, but they're all like, all the kids in her age range are mile level meteorologists with the UV index and where that's going to be and how it affects their day, which is pretty amazing. But so I see it, right? I see these predictions. I've seen the evolution surely through my life. But like what you're saying, Jimmy, like this idea of going past 14 days with a major weather event is really, truthfully, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that could be a thing, or that AI could accurately predict that. I don't know. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that.
It's outside of our frame of reference. We've never experienced knowing that far ahead, because weather is usually so prescient. It's so chaotic, right? Like back in Hawaii, the one of the jokes is if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, right? And I'm sure that's a joke everywhere, really. But we have periodic showers that happen all throughout the day, almost every day. If the wind changes, it drops out. It's like, oh, it's comfortable. Nope, everything's now hot and muggy, and that can shift multiple times a day. So my frame of reference for weather is like, 5 minutes, it might be completely different. But to be able to model out 30 days in advance, it's like, oh no, in this particular place, this is going to be the weather at this time. We're 90% sure. It's like, wow. Now,
but weather data is also just a series of patterns, right? And that's what AI is great at, is recognizing the patterns. It never occurred to us that you could recognize a pattern 30 days out, right? That's not something that humans have a shot at being able to like intuit. I actually wonder about indigenous communities. Now that I'm saying that, it's entirely possible that that was a skill that humans had and then lost in some cultures.
Well, we know animals have the innate ability to. We just saw the video the other day at San Diego where there was the earthquake, and before the camera started shaking, the elephants had already started moving. Right, so we know like the birds chirping when it's going. My granddaughter. My grandmother who had a summer home out on all the way on the end of Long Island in this really cool town called Mattatuck. She taught me when I was just a kid to listen to the birds because it was really quiet and peaceful out there to tell when it was going to rain. And she also said you could tell by the way the leaves moved on the tree. And she was right. I mean, she was right. I mean, it wasn't like she had an app in her hand. She just was that in tune with what was going on. She's like, no, Brian, it's always the same way. And she could figure it out, right? When the rain was coming off the coast and stuff like that. So I wonder if it's like Beth, like biology or anything else. It's just about picking up on more signals, to your point. Like maybe that have already been there, and there's been cultures who have been doing this for centuries, hundreds of years or whatever. And AI will give us the ability to pick up on these like fine-tuned signals that, to your point, like a biology where we were aware of, but we just never had the processing power to do anything realistic with, because it would have had to been done so fast and with so many points of data that it would have never made feasible sense to do it, because you would have been processing human, like hundreds of hours of human effort for something that may or may not happen in 5 minutes. And of course, there's no value in doing that. But if you can now, because of AI, that makes a huge pattern.
For those kinds of nature-oriented markers that are sensible by local populations, I think they're really geographically dependent. Meaning, if she's on a cliff high above the Dover Hill, like on the coast, there's certain conditions that over generations you might have really important signals that are specific to that location. But that doesn't really generalize. Those signals don't generalize geographically. Sure. So now I want to just jump back into for the architecture geeks, where the state of the art is right now. As I mentioned, that transformer models have shown really good ability, even though they were just trained in sort of general intelligence based on text training largely, but now multimodal training. They end up being very good predictors. But there are two different approaches that are now the state of the art in weather forecasting specifically. And one is called a graph neural network that's been designed specifically for weather prediction. Like the graph that's underneath that graph neural network is possessed of all the information that's necessary to tune that deep neural network into a great predictor of weather patterns. And then there's this very cool initiative that was built by, let me see who this was again. This is called Aardvark, and it was developed by the University of Cambridge in concert with Microsoft Research and the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, ECMRWF, that organization that has a lot of the data and the technology that's being applied to weather forecasting. So it's an end-to-end AI system expressly built for weather forecasting. And here's some of the characteristics of it. Here's the quote from the perplexity analysis of this particular Aardvark system. It says, "It's transformative, a fully AI-driven weather forecasting system, fast, accurate, and accessible predictions, replacing the entire traditional workflow with a single efficient machine learning model. Its architecture and performance signal a new era for global and local weather forecasting." Now that's probably taken from some marketing materials from the initiative that was done by Microsoft and that. But there's something special about that one, and it's probably capable of both real-time local and near-term forecasting, as well as much longer range forecasting, because it's possessed of not only long series, like seasonal variation data from many, many years collected by the European Center, but also it's using the most advanced local real-time information from many, many, many sensors. So here's how they describe that part of it. Takes raw observations from satellites, weather stations, ships, and other sensors, and directly produces global and local weather forecasts. No physics-based simulation or numerical weather prediction models that are not physics-based involved in the steps at all. It's just a pure machine learning prediction engine, but it's using all that data, historical and immediate, literally from what this ship is experiencing on the water right now.
So this also brings up the idea of paying attention to what the systems are that the weather is predicted on top of. And among one of the things that's happening in the downsizing of the US government is defunding some of that. So I wonder if we're moving into a place, I think actually we're already there in some ways, where the data collection is privatized, and so weather becomes potentially a subscription model. I know that that's happening a little bit anyway, because actually I have an improv friend who does forecasts for corporations. So and they use a different set of satellites, or an augmented set of satellites, right? So but that sort of brings into play what are the changes that we're going to see in terms of data collection. And calling back to what Brian said, I feel like, hey, if some of the data collection can just be attached to people living their lives in different ways, that may supplement the parts that we may see a gap in, based on some monies and programs coming offline.
Yeah, right. Like the point is like, what happens if Google or Nvidia fully own that data that really can be impacting lives? What if politics gets involved in that in some way, and now some people are being restricted from getting potentially life-saving, crop-saving, agriculture, on and on and on data, and because they got shut off access to it, so because of some retaliatory whatever, right, with politics and stuff like that. So it is, I agree, Beth. I think that is a real potential danger here is, do we want, I'm not saying Facebook does, but do we want the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, or put in your CEO, Elon Musk, whoever you want to put in there, and saying, do we want them in control of potentially life-saving, life-threatening agriculture data? I mean, it's not billions, it's probably trillions of dollars worth of movement if those models became that accurate. I mean, back to your original point, Jimmy, of like, what is this? What's the ripple effect, pun intended? What's the ripple effect outside of just knowing better predictions 20 or 30 days out? Who controls it? And if it's not nationalized, or if it's not made free and public and open sourced as it should be, what does that potentially mean for markets and things like that?
We're already seeing it. If people just paid attention to the burgeoning water wars, that is an early indicator of what we'll see on a more grander scale. Because right now has always been water rights conflicts, right? Usually has to do with agriculture in some form. I need this water to water my cattle. I need this water to grow my plants. We need this water so that this city can drink. We need this other water so that it produces hydroelectric power, and everything gets split up. And water is a fairly finite resource as long as we're drawing more and more of it. So also why that conversation of water use for AI, data centers, compute in general is brought up, because that's what's used to cool these systems and maintain these systems, right? And the more load you have on it, the more they heat up and the more cooling they would need, and so on and so forth. So paying attention to how the battle over water is going, because that's just going to increase. That's an indicator of what the larger potential of like weather manipulation is. Can your rainfall be a subscription service, like Beth said, right?
Imagine.
If you can control where it's going to rain, it can rain in region 1, but if it rains in region 1, does that make rainmaking more expensive to happen in region 2? Or region 2, you didn't pay your monthly bill, so only region 1's going to get its water. And how is that going to affect global climate, right? So there's always a larger issue, and you always have to be aware of, hey, how is this going to play out? And just keep in mind, if you want to know what a corporation is going to do in any given situation based on the current status, it's always going to be what's going to cost them the least and make them the most money. And then there's your framework.
Well, and
Well, as we
that's the
wrap,
difference between corporations and governments, right? Because corporations are beholden to shareholders and making money, and governments are not set up that way. Yeah, Brian, what were you going to say?
no, I was just gonna, I was gonna wrap up, but if everybody's cool with it, I do want to call out Jude. Just said, call it the Genesis weather prediction. He could feel it in the air tonight. Great call out, Jude. As always, I love Jude's puns inside the inside the chat. He always has some of the best. Well, let's call it what it is. Dad jokes in the chat, but that's okay. A good dad joke's a good dad joke. So we appreciate everybody, Greg and everybody else. Gwen, it was good to see you earlier on in the conversation. Usually she can't join us till a little bit later, so it's great seeing everybody in the chat as always. Appreciate you guys. Look, the rest of the week, tomorrow's the news. Thursday, we're going to be talking about some like missteps and different ways, mistakes that can happen with businesses as you do AI rollout. I had said yesterday, it's kind of almost a continuation of not today, but yesterday's conversation. If you had you plus one other human plus AI, what would your startup look like? So we'll continue that conversation on Thursday, and then Friday, it's our second Be About It show. Very, very highly rated, viewed show that we did a couple weeks ago, and we want to come back and do it again because people obviously liked it. Which is to really just show. It's a show and tell show. That's what it is. A show and tell AI show where we're going to show different processes. Could be stuff we're doing or stuff we've just seen on the web that we think, hey, look, this is actually working. This person's showing how to build it. It's not just the results. It's the actual, here is the system. They're doing it. You can do it too type of stuff. So that'll be on Friday. So that's what we got coming up the rest of the week. Don't forget, you can go join us in the community at community. I'm going to try that one more time. You can join us in our new community at dailyaishowcommunity.com. You can join the newsletter that goes out every Sunday at thedailyishow.com, where we're going to get that all straight and make it easy on everybody. But that's what it is right now. Thanks everybody again in the comments, in the chat, and we'll see you back tomorrow for the news.
Aloha.